All right. At long last, I've gotten back my my case Stockman. I'll put the video for my initial review, which was one of the worst knives I've bought in recent years. You spend 65 bucks on a US made knife, and it's a $65 knife, so it's not an expensive knife, but it was not even as good as some of the $20 Chinese knives. And I mean that seriously. And I mean several of the cheap Chinese knives. Any of those $50 Civivis blow away anything I've ever seen from Case. Now, maybe they got some higher end, $500 special edition knives that are top notch, but the regular Case stuff just simply isn't. I've had good luck with my Trapper. I have another Stockman that's pretty decent from them, but this was the one that I got. It's the, there's all the model number information, whatever. Close length 4 1/4 inches. This is the stag handle. And the problem that I had with the other one, and I'll just put the link in the video without going through the whole thing, but it was like the pins were sticking out. The two of the slabs were cracked from them pressing that in too hard and cracking that. It had gaps here in the springs. The polish wasn't even. The really bad blade rubbing. The transitions here, there were like chunks. It was just horrible. It was absolutely it wasn't a Monday morning knife. It was a Friday 3 minutes before quitting time knife, and never should have gone out the door. So I contacted Case, gave them the opportunity to fix it. They gave me an RMA and said, send it in, we'll repair or replace it. And they've actually gone and just replaced it. There was no way they were going to take apart a knife and try to fix all the problems with it and reassemble it. It would be cheaper just to send me a new one. So that's what they did. So let's go through and see if they have improved. So the first thing I'm noticing is that pin sticks out a little bit, but that's okay. I mean, those pins typically do in the middle. That's the one that holds the main springs in place. The ones that hold that's a good polish. That's flush. That doesn't stick out. Okay, so that's a big improvement. I had 2 pins that were sticking out, and I had to tap them back in, and then they'd work themselves out again. The transitions all the way around, these edges, there's no sharp edges. There's no cracks, so that's good. That's a big improvement. These transitions here are really nice, actually. These are on par with the Case Trapper that I have. Like, you can feel it with your fingernail, but that one's actually so good that when you just run your finger over it, you almost don't feel it. Same on that one. So definitely a better job. No sharp edges there. Everything's good there. Okay. So opening it up, first thing I noticed, springs are very light. So the walk and talk, everyone, but that's okay, because as we found out in a lot of those other videos, that super snappy walk and talk usually means that spring is overpowering the blade, and when it hits, the kick doesn't stop it from over traveling, and then your blade smacks into that hump down in there that's on the spring and dents your blade, puts a literal dent in the edge of your blade, flattens it, and you got to grind it out. And all the companies I've talked to and researched, their answers are, we'll just keep sharpening the blade till it goes away. Keep removing blade material till it stops battering itself on there. And to me, that doesn't seem like an optimal solution. But anyway, polish looks good. These almost feel like it's a hollow grind. It's kind of weird because you don't see it. You're used to sealing the hollow grind because I guess they want to show it off. But it does feel like it's a hollow grind. Point's good. Edge is pretty good. We'll run it through a piece of paper, see how it cuts. Blade, that one looks good. Seems sharp enough. Spay blade feels good. Feels a little gritty, the action, but when you look in there and you look at that edge that the spring ends up riding over, it's somewhat polished there, but it's still kind of rough. It's not as good as like the GE says out of the box. But over time, my Trapper broke in after a week or two really nicely, so it's not horrible. Okay, feels good so far. There's a little more blade wobble than I like, but that's the problem with slip joints, unless you get to go play with one, which is the only way I'm going to be buying Case knives from now on. If I buy a Case knife, it has to be one, or the Bokers for that matter. It's got to be one that I can go in and handle. If it's going to be the older traditional style. If it's a newer style where you can adjust the pivot, things like that, that's fine. I don't mind that. I can get rid of the blade wobble and get it just to that right tension that I want. But these are they are what they are. There's a little bit of blade wobble in that. What about this blade? Yeah, that one. You could almost hear that. I don't know if I can get this close enough to the microphone, but listen. There's a little click. So that blade's got enough wobble that it actually clicks. That is crazy. But, I mean, I guess that's just the way it is with these kinds of knives. I mean, it'll cut as long as it doesn't have so much wobble that it presses apart and like the blade. I had a blade as a kid. It was probably a piece of crap knife. I don't even remember what it was because it was 42 years ago. But pressing really hard on it, the blade, it created enough gap. I guess it was really soft pins that between the spring and the blade and the bolster, the blade kind of created a gap and it went whoop, and the blade folded back. I don't think there's any danger of that here. You'd have to do some real twisting and you'd see that pin pulling out, which brings up another thing. Do we see the pins on this one? Because on the other one, we could see the pins. You can see that one a little bit. You can see the outline. Yeah, barely. On the other end, looks pretty good. Overall, I'd say this is a big improvement. There's a little more blade, and then I think, well, what's a Swiss Army knife out here for? You know, that's the thing. I look at other companies, and these knives cost, I think, I mean, what did I pay for this one? This is the A-Lock, so they're in the same price range. I mean, this one might have been like around 70-ish, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'll have to go look it up. But you're talking about $65 knife. It's not like you're talking about $65 knife and $150 knife. They might be within $10 of each other. And when you look at the Victorinox knives, especially when you look at the A-Locks, that just seem to be a little stronger. I mean, there's no discernible blade wobble. The spring's a little stronger. It's got a little bit more snap. Never had a Victorinox, whatever, knife dull itself or ding the blade by closing it. I don't get a lot of blade rubbing. I mean, you can say, well, it's Swiss, it's this and that. Well, everybody talks about American made, and American made, you know, by American, Americans, you know, quality. But I look at two different knives here, and this one looks pretty and looks traditional, but the Victorinox is a much far superior knife. When you look at the construction, probably the steel, maybe the steel, not sure, not entirely sure. I think that steel is actually good. They just don't harden it as much. Makes it super easy to sharpen, but you will have to sharpen it more often. But all those edges, I mean, and I know that these blades are stamped. You know, they stamp the blades out of raw material, out of sheets of metal, and then they do all the grinding and stuff. I believe they do it the same way here, but you just see all that looks like crud. That's actually just like, I don't know, maybe these blades are cast, but that's actually just metal. And it's kind of cruddy and rough, and it has pits and carbon in it and stuff. You don't see any of that stuff on a Victorinox. There's much more fit and finish here, much more attention to detail. And these blades open up. They have nice, strong springs, and they snap open, and there's very little blade wobble on any of these tools. Not sure why. And I think that these will hold up better over time, because while these pins get peened a little bit, they're kind of sitting flush, whereas this pin, this stainless steel pin, sits outside and it's really mashed over. Like that really can't pull back in. Here, you know, the pins are in there pretty tight and they do get peened a little bit, but then when you polish it flush, there's nothing overhanging the outside to kind of grip it and prevent it from being pulled in. If you were really torquing on that blade or doing any kind of twisting motion, you could very easily pull that pin in a fraction of a millimeter, and then all of a sudden you got a really wobbly blade. So that's the part that concerns me about this type of knife already having that kind of blade wobble. I mean, it'll work, but it's not a hard use knife by any means. I feel like this knife, being that you've got the metal scales that are aluminum, so it's not steel, but they are fairly thick, and you've got that big mushroom on the end. Obviously, it's a different look. Here, you can't have that mushroom. They want to polish it and have it, you know, look like it's not there. But that's a stronger design. That's a much stronger design. It eliminates blade pull, a blade play. It pinches those things together, and you're not going to pull that mushroomed and unmushroom it and pull it through to loosen it. So I'll give them props for sending me back a much better knife. It's not perfect, but it's a $65 US made knife, and US quality just isn't what it used to be. You know, if you're going to spend hundreds of dollars, yeah, you're going to go buy a Microtech or something, or a Hogue, or, you know, whatever. But when you're down in this price range, when you're paying American workers and you're paying them, you know, you're paying them higher wages, higher benefits, the cost of employees is just much more. You're not getting as much for your knife, because when you take out the labor costs, there's a lot less left over for materials, time, fit and finish, inspection, things like that. When you're dealing with the Chinese knives, they're not paying as much for labor. Sucks for them, but better for whoever's buying the knife, because what they save on labor, they put into design, they put into fit and finish, CNC machining, the materials themselves. And that's why a lot of the Chinese knives are superior to what's coming out of the States. Not terribly sharp. Yeah, I'll have to run that. I mean, it cuts, but I'll have to run my stone over that real quick just to take out some of that toothiness. That's the other thing, is these blades come very, very kind of toothy from the factory, so they're just not that. Yeah, it's slicing, but it's not as sharp as I would want it. If I were to take this guy and make a cut, yeah, effortless. No, that one didn't go so well. I don't know why it does that. You start cutting and the first one's great and then the second one's not. It's like, I'm not rolling the edge on one paper slice, I don't think. Yeah, I don't know. They'll cut, I mean, for whatever tasks, but it doesn't have that hair popping. I don't even know if I ever sharpened this one. This may be the factory edge. So I'll tune these up just a little bit, run my super fine stone and my Lansky sharpener over them real quick just to tune them up. But anyway, there you go. They sent me a new one. It's an improvement. It's not perfect, but this one at least is passable. I would use this one. So good job for Case for that at least.